There's a particular kind of hurt that no one prepares you for. It's not losing someone to death. It's not a fight. It's not even a moment you can point to. It's the slow realization that your grandchildren, the ones you held as babies, the ones you thought about every single day, have grown into people who seem perfectly comfortable without you. They're not cruel about it. That almost makes it harder. They just don't seem to need you, or want you, or think about you the way you think about them. If that's where you are right now, I want you to know you are not imagining it, and you are not alone, and you are not past the point of doing something about it. I'm going to tell you what happened to me, what I got wrong, and what I finally understood. Too late for some of it, but not too late for all of it. Stay with me. I have 4 grandchildren. The oldest is 26 now. The youngest just turned 14. I know their birthdays. I know what they looked like at 2 years old, at 5, at 8. I have photographs in frames on the wall that I walk past every morning. What I didn't have, for a long stretch of years, was any real idea who they actually were. And what's worse, I didn't know that I didn't know. I thought I knew them. I thought the relationship was intact. I thought showing up at Christmas and sending cards and asking their parents how they were doing meant I was present in their lives. I wasn't. Not really. And the moment I understood that, truly understood it, not just as a vague worry but as a clear fact, it was one of the lonelier moments of my adult life. It wasn't always like this. When they were small, I was the center of something. Grandpa's house meant cookies and the good TV and staying up a little past bedtime. It meant stories and Saturday mornings and the kind of attention that parents, exhausted and overscheduled, sometimes can't give. I was needed. I was wanted. I was known. There's no feeling quite like being truly known by a child. They don't perform for you. They don't manage you. They just arrive, full of noise and questions and absolute trust that you will be glad to see them. And I was, every time. I think I assumed that would last. I assumed that what we had when they were 6 and 8 and 10 would simply continue, that the relationship had been built and now it would stand. I didn't understand that a relationship with a grandchild isn't a structure you build once. It's more like a garden. It changes with every season. And if you tend it the same way every year, regardless of what's grown or what's changed, you will eventually find yourself standing in a garden that no longer responds to what you're doing. The first sign I missed was simple. They stopped asking me questions. When children are young, they ask questions constantly, about everything, about how clouds work, and why dogs dream, and what it was like when I was a boy. I loved those questions. I had answers. I had stories. I had 80 years of material. But somewhere around the time the oldest was 12 or 13, the questions slowed, then stopped, and I filled the silence the way I knew how, with my own stories, with my own observations, with the things I wanted to say. I talked more. They listened less, and I told myself it was just a phase. It wasn't a phase. It was a signal, a gentle, patient signal that they were changing, that what they needed from me was changing, and that if I wanted to stay connected, I had to change too. I didn't get that memo. I want to tell you about a particular Thanksgiving. This would have been maybe 7 or 8 years ago. The whole family came. 3 of the grandchildren were there. We sat around the table I had eaten at for 30 years, and I looked down at one end of that table and saw something I had never quite seen clearly before. My grandchildren were present. They were physically in the room. They passed the dishes and said thank you and answered when spoken to, but they were not there. Not in the way I remembered. Not in the way I wanted. After dinner they drifted to different corners. Phones came out. Conversations happened in texts, apparently to people who weren't at the table. I remember feeling something I can only describe as invisible. Not angry, just unseen. I sat in my chair at the head of a table I had sat at for decades and felt like a piece of furniture. Familiar, unremarkable, easy to walk past. I drove home that night and didn't tell anyone how I felt. That was my second mistake. Now I want to be honest about something, because it would be easy and convenient and somewhat satisfying to blame the phones, To say, the screens took my grandchildren away from me, the internet, the apps, the world inside the device. And I won't pretend that technology hasn't changed things. It has. The way young people spend their time, the way they communicate, the way they build their social worlds, it looks almost nothing like what I knew at their age. But here is the truth that took me a long time to face. The phone was not the problem. The phone was just where they went when being with me felt like work. When a young person would rather look at a screen than talk to the person across from them, that is information. It is not comfortable information, but it is honest. It means the connection isn't strong enough to compete. It means the conversation isn't interesting enough, or safe enough, or alive enough. That's not an indictment. It's just something worth knowing. And I could not know it, could not do anything useful with it, as long as I was busy being offended by the phone. Let me tell you what I think actually happened. Looking back now, with the distance of years, my grandchildren didn't become strangers to me in a single moment. It happened the way most slow losses happen, so gradually that each individual step felt small. They grew from children into teenagers, and teenagers by nature are building their own worlds. This is not a flaw, this is development. Every generation of teenagers has done this. Every generation of grandparents has found it disorienting. But in my case, I didn't adapt. I kept relating to them the way I had when they were 9, the same jokes, the same questions, the same frame, and they were not 9 anymore. My oldest granddaughter was navigating college applications and friendships and figuring out who she was going to be. My grandson was building an entirely separate life online, interests I didn't share, humor I didn't understand, a whole world of reference that was invisible to me. I didn't enter that world. I didn't try to. I waited for them to come back to mine. They didn't. Not fully. Not anymore. There was a period, I'd say it lasted about 3 years, where I told myself a certain story. The story was, my grandchildren have been influenced by their parents, by their peers, by the culture, by screens and busyness and a generation that doesn't know how to slow down and appreciate what's in front of them. That story was comfortable. It kept me at the center as the wronged party, but it was mostly wrong. My grandchildren had not been influenced away from me. They had simply grown, and I had not grown alongside them. The estrangement, and I'll call it that, even though it was quiet and undramatic, was not the result of someone doing something wrong. It was the result of a relationship that stopped being tended, by both sides, yes, but I was the elder. I had more experience. I had more to lose, the responsibility to reach across that gap. It belonged more to me than to a 16-year-old who was just trying to get through their day. So what changed? I'll tell you what changed. I had a conversation with my son, the father of 2 of my grandchildren, that I didn't expect to have. He wasn't harsh, he's not that kind of man, but he was honest with me in a way that he had never quite been before. He said, "Dad, the kids feel like when they're with you they're on trial, like they have to be a certain way, like there's a right answer and they don't always know what it is." I sat with that for a long time. On trial. I hadn't thought of myself as a man who puts people on trial. I thought I was interested. I thought my questions were engaged. I thought my opinions were just opinions, but he was telling me something real. I had opinions about their grades, their choices, their interests, their futures, and I shared those opinions freely, the way older men of my generation often do, not as attacks but as investment, as caring. What they felt, on the receiving end, was judgment. I had to sit with that for a long time. I want to be fair to myself here, and I want to be fair to you if you're in a similar place. The intention behind what we do as grandparents, the questions about grades, the comments about choices, the advice offered without being asked, that intention is almost always love. We care. We've lived long enough to see how things turn out. We want to spare them the mistakes we made. That impulse is not wrong, but intention and impact are 2 different things. You can mean love and deliver pressure. You can mean encouragement and land criticism. And when a young person, whose entire internal life is about figuring out who they are, separate from the adults who raised them, when that young person consistently feels judged in your presence, they will eventually stop coming around. Not because they hate you, because self-protection is a basic human instinct, and we taught them to protect themselves. That's what we raised them to do. After that conversation with my son, I made a decision. Not a dramatic one, not a grand gesture. I just decided to try something different. The next time I was with my youngest grandchildren, the two who were still teenagers at the time, I made one rule for myself. I would ask and I would listen, and I would not advise, not once, not even when I had something good to say. Just ask, just listen. It sounds simple. For me, it was one of the harder things I've done, because every instinct I have says you have something useful here, share it. That's what elders do. But I sat on it. I asked them what they were interested in. I asked what was hard. I asked what they thought about things, not to correct the answer but to hear it. And something happened that I didn't expect. They talked. Not just politely, not just to answer and be done. They actually talked. My granddaughter told me about something that was happening at school, something complicated, something she was genuinely upset about. She didn't ask for my opinion. She just told me, and I just listened. At the end she said, "Thanks, Grandpa. I don't know, it just helped to say it." I drove home that evening feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Useful. Not because I had fixed anything or taught anything, but because I had simply been present. Now I want to tell you something that might be harder to hear. Some of the distance between me and my grandchildren was not about me at all. And that took me even longer to accept. My two oldest grandchildren, my daughter's children, have grown up in a household that has had its share of difficulty. A divorce in the middle of their teenage years, a period of financial strain, things that were hard and that I was not in most cases a part of. I assumed that because I was the grandfather, the stable one, the constant, I should have been where they turned. They turned inward, to each other, to their friends, to the world they had built that didn't include me. That was their right. When families go through hard things, people build walls. Often the walls are built around the smallest possible group, the people you absolutely trust, the people you see every day. Grandparents, who live separately, who visit occasionally, who exist at a slight remove. We sometimes get left on the outside of those walls, not as a punishment, just as a result, and the only thing that helps in time is patience and consistency, and refusing to take it personally when you can manage not to. Let me tell you about something that actually worked, not as advice, just as a thing that happened. My youngest grandchild, the 14-year-old, is obsessed with something I know absolutely nothing about, a kind of music I had never heard before, a whole world of it. Artists and styles and inside references that made no sense to me. A year ago, I asked him to make me a list, just the songs he thought I should hear, his favorites. He looked at me like I had said something unexpected. He made the list, 15 songs. I listened to all of them, every one. Some of them I genuinely couldn't follow, but I listened, and the next time I saw him, I told him what I thought. Honestly, I told him which one surprised me, which one I didn't understand, which one, and this was true, I actually liked. He lit up, not because I loved the music, he knew I probably wouldn't, but because I had gone into his world and taken it seriously. That is a small thing, but small things are where it starts. I want to talk about something that doesn't get said enough, the grief of this, because that's what it is. When you feel your grandchildren becoming strangers, when the distance grows and the calls don't come and the visits feel hollow, that is a grief. It is not the same as death, but it has something of the same shape, a loss of something you loved, a future you had imagined that is no longer quite real. And grief that goes unnamed tends to come out sideways. It comes out as resentment at the parents, as pointed comments at family dinners, as a quiet bitterness that people can feel even when it's never spoken. I know because I carried that bitterness for years without realizing what it was. I thought I was realistic. I thought I was just seeing things clearly, that my grandchildren had drifted, that the world had changed, that families weren't what they used to be. What I was actually doing was grieving, silently, alone, and that unexpressed grief was, in small ways, making me harder to be around. If you recognize that in yourself, the sharpness that comes from loss, the quiet that comes from hurt, it is worth naming it, just to yourself first, just as a fact. I am grieving this, and that is allowed. I found in my late 70s and into my 80s that putting it on paper helped. Not to send, just to write. A letter I never mailed, to each grandchild. What I wished they knew about me. What I hoped for them. What I was sorry I had gotten wrong. The writing didn't fix anything directly, but it did something important inside me. It helped me separate what I was feeling from what I was showing. It helped me get the grief out of my chest and onto a page where it couldn't leak out sideways into the people I loved. Some people find that kind of thing helpful. Some don't. I'm not prescribing anything, but I'll say this. The conversations I had with my grandchildren after I'd done that writing were different. Quieter on my end, more open, less defended. Something had been released. Here is what I know now, at 83, that I wish I had known at 65. A relationship with a grandchild is not inherited. You do not earn it automatically by being the grandfather. You do not receive it as a birthright. You are not owed it by biology or by the years you spent raising their parent. You build it, deliberately, repeatedly, differently in each season of their life. When they are small, you earn it by being fun and safe and endlessly patient. When they are teenagers, you earn it by being someone they don't feel judged by, someone they can talk to without it getting back to mom or being turned into a lesson. When they are young adults, you earn it by being genuinely curious about the people they are becoming, not the people you hoped they'd become, the people they actually are. That is a different skill at every stage, and no one teaches it to us. We have to figure it out ourselves, usually too late, usually after we've already made the mistakes. My oldest granddaughter got married last spring. I was there. I walked her down the aisle alongside her father. And at the reception, late in the evening after the dancing had started, she found me sitting at a table alone, the way I sometimes do at loud events. She sat down next to me, didn't say anything for a moment, then she put her head on my shoulder. She said, "I'm glad you're here, Grandpa. I mean really here. You seem different lately." I didn't ask what she meant. I thought I knew. And I thought about all the years I had spent waiting to be sought out, waiting to be needed, waiting for them to come back to me. All those years of waiting. She had grown up in the meantime. And somewhere in the last few years, through the music lists and the listening and the letting go of the advice I was burning to give, something between us had quietly, slowly repaired, not to what it was when she was 6. It can't go back there. To something new, something adult, something that fit who we both were now. That is worth more to me than I can say. If you are watching this, and you feel that distance from your grandchildren, the polite distance, the phone-glancing distance, the distance of people who share blood but not much else right now, I want to say something plainly. It is not finished. Not yet. These relationships have a long arc. Grandchildren who feel distant at 16 can become the ones who call most often at 30. The ones who barely tolerated Sunday dinners at 14 can become the ones who want to know your stories at 25. People change. Life changes them. Loss and time and their own hard seasons have a way of turning younger people back toward the older ones who are still standing. But there needs to be something to turn back toward. A door that stayed open. A version of you that didn't harden and didn't give up and didn't make them feel guilty for the years they were away. That's the work. It's not loud work. It's not dramatic. It's just staying, being available, being genuinely interested when they do show up, however briefly, being someone worth returning to. I'll close with this. I am not a perfect grandfather. I never was. I made the mistakes I've described here, and some others I haven't. I waited too long to understand some things. I held on too tightly to the versions of my grandchildren that existed when they were young, but I am still here, and that, I've come to believe, is not a small thing. Just still being here, still interested, still showing up without agenda, still willing to listen to 15 songs I don't understand and tell the truth about what I think. That's not nothing. That's not nothing at all. If any part of this touched something real for you today, if you're carrying this quietly, I'd be glad to hear about it. Leave a comment. Tell me where you are with your own grandchildren. Tell me what you've tried. Tell me what surprised you. This channel exists for these conversations, the ones we don't quite know how to start at the dinner table. If it's a place that feels honest to you, please subscribe. We're here every week, talking about the things that matter in the quiet years. Thank you for staying.